course you're sorry, but it's like, what are you going to do about it? And that was his silent way of reaching for help. That was my window to say, hey, what are you doing about it? Definitely learned a lot from that as well as the others about when you see those things come up. Saying sorry is like one of the worst things to say.
This is the More Than Capable podcast. Life applies pressure in predictable places, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. More Than Capable exists for those who choose to prepare. No hacks, no shortcuts, no posturing. Just discipline, faith, and practices that help you stand when life presses down. Welcome. I am glad you are here. I really reflected back, and I actually remember the moment I met Morgan, and I don't know if you recall it much, but it stands out, like not the details, but the moment for whatever reason, not the details surrounding it, I should say. But we met one summer. It must have been late summer, I believe, as the school year was about to start. A
2010.
bunch of guys from the fraternity were up in Minnesota on a recruiting event, and they were going to the St. Paul Saints game. So I was like, you know what? I'll join them. I'm back in town from what my summer adventures had me doing, and I missed the guys. I wanted to see them, and I showed up, and I distinctly remember somebody pointing you out to me and just being like, that dude's a stud, and he is really interesting, but unfortunately, he's not going to Iowa State. He's got other plans. It's a real bummer. Like, he's a really genuine guy. And I just remember we had a little conversation, but what I really want to know and what I think will set this conversation up is who was that man, that young man on the bleachers, and what were his plans and what changed from that point on the bleachers forward.
It was funny. So, geez, yeah, that would have been 2010. So I was 17. I was young for my grade. So I was 17, getting ready to turn 18. I mean, I didn't really grow up with much. Grew up pretty poor. Um, and I always had this dream of, serving in the military. And really kind of trying to figure out how to get my, kind of change the trajectory of, the family and like of myself. But I wasn't really sure how, but I knew I had the big calling to serve. And so, I mean, at that time when you met me, I had plans to go to the Naval Academy or West Point. I wasn't exactly sure which one. I didn't know what I really wanted to do, at all. I just knew I wanted to, give back. And specifically, my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor, and getting to know him, he passed away my freshman year of high school, and getting to know him as a kid had a pretty profound impact on me. And learning about really the fighting forces that freed him from Auschwitz, as a, 8, 9, 10-year old, you're starting to learn about, world history and whatnot. And then hearing it from the horse's mouth on that day, was really something I wanted to do. Uh, Fortunately and unfortunately, I think definitely fortunate, more so on the fortunate side. I got waitlisted and denied by both, and so then my backup plans were either Minnesota, Mizzou, or Iowa State, and then Iowa State had the best engineering degree out of the three, and then so I ended up going to Iowa State and connecting with all the boys.
And reflecting back on those moments with your grandfather, the survivor of the Holocaust, like were those were those private moments, just you and him, or would it be instances where he would just kind of open up and start sharing? And I ask that because I reflect back on my own relationship with my grandfathers, and it's just really interesting. Like sometimes the most deep connections and moments happen incredibly unexpectedly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a mixed bag, really, because he was a very like incredibly private person, and he did not open up about them much at all. So a lot of what I know of him were based around two interviews that he did with my aunt and my cousin. Um, and they were recorded interviews, and so I got to learn a lot of it from that. But then also just like kind of tidbits growing up, but also I didn't as a young kid, I didn't really fully I knew he was important. I knew what he went through was, arguably one of the worst events in, human history. But when you're that young, you don't fully understand the gravity of what I had access to. And so I definitely didn't prioritize getting the stories from him because also because of what he went through. I mean, he was one of five brothers and sisters, parents, every single member of his family was killed in the Holocaust. He was the only survivor. And so because of that, he was essentially raised by Nazis from ages 13 when he was kidnapped in 1939 to 19. And he was an incident, it's tough to say this, but it's like he was an inspirational figure, but a very, very tough human being to love,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
Because he did not give out love himself, right? And so he treated um a lot of the people in my family like very poorly. And so everybody loved him for who he was, either father, grandfather, uncle, like whatever whatever the relationship was. But interpersonally, it was very difficult to maintain a relationship with him because he didn't give love because he never received it. I mean, he lost everything at 12, 13 and when he got kidnapped.
Can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Were were you able to see, or maybe even in reflecting back, like, were there different, aspects to the relationship or ability to have at least maybe a little bit of meaningful connection between, like, your grandfather and his children versus your grandfather and his grandchildren? Um,
Yeah. It was tough, and then that was one of the things I really noticed growing up. And I kind of as I grew up was able to reflect on it and try to apply it to more relationships. But I had probably the best relationship with him out of anybody in the family. Quite frankly, because I was the last of his name
mhm,
and a grandson, right? So I
mhm,
was very innocent
mhm.
and I was very young. I was his name because I'm the only boy of my generation with Hampel as the last name. And pretty much everybody else in the family had a very, very strained relationship. And so I felt guilty being treated with respect and, of some flavor of love compared to everybody else. And so because of that, I often distanced myself to not, I don't know, it was a very weird position, but I was trying to kind of play both sides where it's like I knew I wanted a relationship with my grandfather, but I also saw how he treated my dad, right? And I saw how he treated my mom, and I saw how he treated my sister, and so it was. I mean, it's not like I could drive. It's not like I could go there and take him out for coffee and just get to
Right,
know him. So it was always in very select moments, but it's tough because in any relationship we all have our flaws, and the end result is it's like, do you want a relationship? Yes or no, right? And so outstanding, yes, I do. And the same thing goes. I'm really coming to learn it, especially with you know my parents getting older and other friends that have come and gone throughout high school, college, the Navy, and it's so easy to and leaders too that you work through in the professional world. It's so easy. It's like either I like them or I don't, right? But nothing really in life, and especially in relationships, should really ever be black and white. And it's like if there's a net positive to gain from the relationship, which there always is, it's just sometimes harder to find. You have to be very intentional about how you separate the personality out from the person, right? So what can you take and internalize, and what do you have to brush off, um, and try not to let rattle you or let affect you, because in the end, um, it's something I'll talk about this too. Like I'm kind of going through it with my mom right now, and it's very difficult watching your parents get older. And overall, she's doing, you know, pretty well with respect to her age, but her memory's been getting pretty rough. And um, I find myself catching myself that I get short with my mom. and it makes me feel horrible because I don't want to treat her poorly. Like, she's my mom. I love her to death. She'd do anything for me. I'd do anything for her. Um, and despite some of the like the aging and some of the cognitive decline that you can tend to see, um, either it's you let it affect you, which will affect your relationship, and it's like in the end, like I hope to get married sometime soon and have kids, and there's nothing more important. One of the most important things for me going forward is I really want my parents to have a relationship with my kids that I don't have yet, but and so in order to do that, I have to adjust and change my relationship with my parents too. Is it going to be as good as it or as tight as it was when I was growing up? Well, no, because I don't live with them anymore, and things are changing, and you're starting to step. And probably you see it too, maybe with your parents, but slowly the kids become the parents, right? In some aspects, and that's very very difficult because in my head I always see my mom and my dad as when I was a kid, but that capability and that reality is just no longer true. So it's like, how can I oftentimes like swallow my pride, even though like I may be right or it doesn't matter because in the end, like you can't, cognitive decline is very real and circumstances have changed and personalities change as people age. And so it's like if I have to separate, like what is my mom, what is my dad, what are they very good at? How can I give them the most love for the side of them that I'm able to? And the other things that are more frustrating as, we've grown older and situations change and I live out of state. And how do I kind of take those with a grain of salt, let those kind of fall by the wayside, not let them impact the overall goal of how can I maintain the best possible relationship with them?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can not the same scenario with the parents or the health condition there, but what I can speak to on that front, I mean, anyone who wants to talk to me about um recovery, addiction recovery, or just generally what I'm trying starting to find out with regards to any major change that people want to bring into their own life is managing the relationships is the hardest part about making any significant change, even when in the instance of myself where like I battled alcoholism 12 years. Like it was very very clear to me. I did not have that long of a runway before I slipped from like not even casual drinking, but someone who could maintain a little bit of control to being totally lost. And my closest relationships were along for that and they were basically all I had by the end. They were begging me to get help. Yet despite that, navigating the relationships even in recovery is the hardest part, and I see people I've watched people relapse because that challenge has arisen, and I've seen people relapse because a loved one will get upset and they're kind of like, so much has changed, why aren't you happy? And they just they lose it. And going through what Alyssa and I went through, we took the mindset of find our new normal. When something changes in life, work to figure out, like, recognize that, there may have been a before. In your instance, like when I was growing up with my parents in close proximity, having that tight relationship, and now there's a new normal, and we just kind of have to navigate that and figure it out. And I'm kind of wondering, going back to your grandfather after he passed, and I mean, there are a few like just kind of classic 1990s type images that I really remember, and one that always stuck with me was you and your grandpa Wolf, that you kept at your desk all the time. Like, I think it was you two sitting at a computer or something like that, but just you were on his lap at like a young age, like 6, 7, 8, something like that. And it was
So
obviously just something you cherished. But how did you all, your family, you yourself personally, how did you navigate the time after he passed, where it was someone of such importance, such an important role, such an important figure in terms of what they lived through, yet there were difficulties, like it wasn't perfect. So what did that process look like?
I mean, it was tough. It was especially tough for my dad. Um, it was really hard for my dad because he had a very tough childhood and a very strained relationship with his dad. And then after he passed, obviously, you know, whenever there's a death, you talk about the celebration of life, and right. So the stories that come out, however profound and whatnot, were very different than what was the reality for my dad growing up.
What he saw.
So everything about the war was true, and it was definitely tough for him. And for me, it was the kind of, I mean, it was tough for me indirectly because I saw what it was doing to my dad. But then, over time, um, it's kind of similar to what we were, just kind of talking about, how you really have to parse the pieces from the person. And it's, what do I want him to be remembered for? What does my dad want him to be remembered for? And it's not for his flaws, it's for the good parts, right? And the thing is, it's, it's a time in history, and now we're getting to a point where there are very few, like maybe a handful of, Holocaust survivors out who can actually tell a personal tale. And even the ones that were left are often now too young to really fully account for it. So the ones who are old enough are mostly all gone. Um, and, being Jewish and being the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, the most important thing is that his story lives on, right? We're all flawed. And I would hope that when I pass, that people remember me for the impact I made on the lives I touched, not for, hopefully I do more good than bad. And that will be my legacy. And for him, he certainly did, right? Obviously, from the family's perspective, um, there was a lot of conflict, after the war. But the bottom line is his story and the fact that he survived has rippling benefits that can carry generations only if we keep the story alive, right? And that has such a larger, more profound impact than the fact that, he was incredibly cheap. He was very, like, incredibly tough on the entire family. He loved, but he showed zero emotion, like all the different things. He was verbally very abusive to my dad. Um, like all that stuff is very hard in the moment. But the bigger picture is, how can we carry his story, his legacy, and especially for, like, Jewish people and anybody else who cares about history to not repeat, because it happened to us then, but you know everything in time kind of goes in cycles. Like, how do we prevent this from ever occurring in the future? And it's through storytelling, and it's through keeping his story alive through, what he went through and what everybody else alongside him uh went through. So I mean, it's not, certainly isn't, and was never easy, but it's really the only option. And you can talk about the nuances in deeper conversations like this, but the bottom line is, like, if you want to have any memory of him or a figure like him, you have to stay focused on the positive, which is the strength and the courage and the discipline, and really the grit to keep moving when really all odds and there's every reason to give up.
Is that a responsibility that you think about or feel every day? Or how does it kind of come up in life? I mean, it sounds like you're extremely connected with it. But how does that play out?
Um, I ju I mean, I try to live so one, I just try to live through it. So the reason why I kept that photo, it's funny, it's actually that's crazy you remember that photo. So that photo is still in my room. I kept it with me, obviously, like, throughout college, especially on my deployments. Um, and I mean, the thing that I really try to do is just emulate what he emulated and be someone and something that he would be proud of. Um been through a lot of hard times in my life as well. Nothing compared to what he's been through, but it's been a sign of strength. And even when there's really every single reason to give up, um, seeing his picture, and he's like, well, he never gave up. You know, it was always a uh, it was always a reminder that I do have it in me, and I can, persevere and push through whatever the scenario was. Um, so I mean, that's really the first thing, and then after and other than that, it's really I became much less, uh, I started vocalizing it a lot more when brought up. When people ask me about, my story, I don't I don't say I ever hid it because it wasn't something worth hiding, but I definitely didn't advertise it. And it's very much who I am, and I don't know why for a very long time I was very, um, shy with those details.
Hmm.
Um, and I really started speaking out about it on de on deployment, really starting to tell his story when I was going through some really hard times, and I found a lot of strength in that, and then as I started to speak more and more to it, more people would, kind of approach me and say, "Thanks for sharing," and tell me their stories, and the more I've done that, the more people have kinda come out of the woodworks to just talk about it and share those stories, keep those stories alive because it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And with your permission, I would love to play that that like 3 to 4 minute speech that
Yeah.
you gave on your deployment. And
Morgan Hampel, Team Lincoln. I'd thank everybody to start for coming out and paying respects. This is a topic that hits home pretty hard for my family, and it's something that I'm usually not comfortable talking in front of crowds, but I feel I would be doing an injustice by not attempting to share the story of my grandfather, who was a survivor. So, my grandfather, Wolf Hampel, he was the youngest of 7 brothers and sisters. Him and his family spent the childhood before the war. They're a very well educated and well respected family. His eldest sister was a doctor, and his parents owned their own horse-drawn taxi cab service. In 1939, at the age of 13, my Papa Wolf was taken from his parents and siblings during Nazis' invasion of Poland. He was initially brought to the Lodz, Poland ghetto, where he was telling me stories of having to smuggle in bread and potatoes for food in order to eat that day. But then from ghetto of Lodz, he was taken to Birkenau labor camp, and then to Auschwitz and Dachau concentration camps. He would describe the struggle of living daily with death. Jews, gypsies, political prisoners would be slaughtered like animals publicly at all hours of the day. One of them being his older brother, who was murdered for his role in the underground resistance fighting and killing Nazis. In 1945, at the age of 19, he was liberated. He was the only one in his family to make it out of the concentration camps alive. After the war, the Allies arranged for survivors to go to school in Munich, Germany to get the education he had missed out as a kid. My grandfather ended up excelling in Munich in the electrical field and became a master electrician. His notebooks from his time at the University of Munich after the Holocaust are now on display at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. He served as a master electrician for 30 years in St. Paul, Minnesota before passing away in 2007 at the age of 81. Throughout my Papa Wolf's life, I learned not to expect anything to be given to me, but that I have the opportunity to achieve anything through hard work and humility. I'm reminded of his life and his legacy every day by this picture I have of him from right around my age after he was liberated from Dachau. I consider myself blessed to have known him, and even more to know that I came from a bloodline as strong as his. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come and listen and pay respects to such a tragic time in human history. It is through storytelling like this, reminiscent on the history of those who came before us, and to never, ever forget what happened, that will keep the legacy alive of those who died for being born for who they were, those who died for standing up for what was just, and those who lived and died for trying to save both. Thank you very much.
And I know we're kind of jumping ahead through many phases
Yeah.
of Morgan by jumping to that, but it was something from my perspective. Like, I saw that picture I was very familiar with that picture of you and him, but I don't think our conversation around him and his impact and his legacy really picked up until you shared that video from deployment. I mean, it was very powerful, and it did seem like a pretty um, pivotal and monumental turning point a little bit with regards to the ability to open up. And I know from my perspective, I always felt like, well, man, why would anyone care about this? And it just I don't know. I've had the same experience as we've been open about the hardships that we've traveled, and just really what I would label as like the shared human experience. There is power in sharing it, and that power comes from the connections that you make and the relationships that you can deepen. And I am very curious about how you navigated a lot. Like you have made a lot of significant changes, and anytime um anytime I hear somebody, and I hear this a lot, people wondering, I hear it a lot from men, but wondering like, man, am I in the right place? Did I make the right career decision? I don't really love what I'm doing. I wish I had more passions. I want to start something, but I don't know how. Anytime I hear someone who is kind of like fearful, desiring change, but then creating excuses and sort of manufacturing fear, I always think about you. And we're gonna back up here to like Iowa State, and then the transitions that you've traversed. Like, how I want you to give an overview of all the life that you've lived and the big scary changes that you've made and how you've navigated through each one.
Well, yeah. So I mean, just quick, summary for the audience. So after college, so I did the 5-year master program similar to you. But while I was kind of going back, I knew I wanted to serve, but I didn't know what ROTC was. Otherwise, I probably would have done that throughout college. So I got an engineering degree, engineering masters. But while I was in my internships going through my masters, I really did not find a connection with the job I was at or the internship I was at, but it felt much more like less like of a company thing than a true culture thing, and a lack of purpose in just doing that straight from school. Um, and so after getting, my undergrad and master's in industrial engineering, I kind of put it all to the side and started coordinating with a recruiter. And so right after I graduated with my master's in 2015, 2 weeks later, I went to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, to join the Navy. And then I was active duty for 10 years as it's called a nuclear surface warfare officer, or like a nuke officer is what we call it for short. So I run and maintain the nuclear plants on aircraft carriers.
No big deal.
And I appreciate it. And then, but I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. Throughout college, I was, starting or attempting to start or failing a whole bunch of companies. 6 months prior to graduation, me and, Tyler Fox, if you remember,
Yeah.
started what just felt like was our next idea. It wasn't anything special compared to the other ones. It was just we just kept going. That one ended up catching a lot of steam. We got accepted into Accelerator 6 months before graduation, raised a bunch of money. And that thing ended up taking off. Fast forward 11 years, it's still around today, and it's a,
Wow.
7-figure, maybe 8-figure top line revenue company, which is kind of crazy.
Wild.
But the thing was 6 months. So that accelerator was the last semester of college. I left for OCS. After OCS, I commissioned, and went straight into a workup cycle and deployment. And so when they went in
What I like really know not an embarrassingly little amount about the armed services. What's your commitment level when you sign up?
I mean, it depends on what you do, but the typical contract is a total of 8 years.
Okay.
And it's either broken up into 4 active, 4 reserve. Mine was 5 and 3. Pilots, it's longer. So it really depends on what you do, but mine was 5 and 3.
Okay. So
Yeah,
this
so
was not like just a 2-year thing.
no,
Like,
no, yeah,
yeah.
you don't sign your life away, but you definitely sign your 20s away.
Yes. Okay.
But
So
so
big decision.
yeah, exactly. But so then as I was deployed, I ended up stepping away from the company because they went in for a raise, and I controlled a significant portion of the cap table while providing zero value at that point. So I walked away to kind of give those guys a fighting chance at raising money. And then, but I still had that bug, that entrepreneurial bug. I was serving, I was loving what I was doing. It was a very chaotic and, tough lifestyle, but there's a lot of purpose and commitment and a brotherhood within, the military that I loved. Um, but as I was looking for what my next venture was going to be, I stumbled upon real estate. And so I started investing in real estate. So I left Clinic Note 2016, started investing in real estate 2017, and then just kind of continually stuck to that, and then really caught the bug. And in 2021 really took off. And by the time I left active duty in 2024, my company that I started with a business partner had about 11, we still today have about 1,100 units of multifamily, about 600 in Iowa, not too far from where we went to school, another 600 in Houston. And now I'm, uh, working at a pretty large firm with, roughly 400 million under management. We invest in mobile home parks. And so I have my portfolio, I raise capital for our deals here in the mobile home park world. And then now I'm out of active duty, but I'm still in the reserves, and, still get to go in and support and serve. So yeah, a bunch of pivots in and throughout all that.
Do you have like a process that you go through, or how do you, when when an idea gets planted in your mind, like the thing that just really stands out to me is, I know fears popped up. I assume that you had plenty of excuses cascade through your system as to why this is a bad idea, why you shouldn't pursue it. Um, what process do you use to just kind of work through it? Or is this something that is just the Morgan Hampel way and you were born this way?
I mean, I wish I had like some master checklists that I could share. One thing I would say, and I've gotten very good at, um, is honestly just listening to myself. And that's much easier said than done. And a lot of people are, no matter what they say internally, are afraid of that. They need outside validation, they need outside confirmation, and they need, regardless of what, if they're deliberately asking for it, they need that external confirmation that what they're doing is correct, even though deep down they may disagree with it. Um, where I would say I don't know if you want to call it, I don't even call it, I mean, maybe it's special, but it's like what's made me unique and be able to pivot is I've just kind of listened to my gut. Um, it's people at any fork in the road, people are so deathly afraid of that fraction of a percent that could be a life crippling defeat. But the thing is like, at any one of those decisions, those forks, there's that fraction of a percent that could be that life crippling defeat. There's that, fraction of a percent that could be a life altering home run, like you bought Bitcoin in 2010 and whatever. But in reality, outside of the fringe, the tails of this curve, that middle 98%, that middle 99.9%, everything in there is recoverable.
Mm-hmm.
And people are afraid to take any action for the fear of landing in that fraction of a fractional percent. But the thing is, even if you take these decisions and you make these steps and you land in the bottom half of that curve, not only is it recoverable, but it will shed light on your next 2, 3, 4 steps that will make sure your next following steps are absolute wins to get you back to where you're going. But the fact that it is a non-zero chance that something really bad could go wrong, people, I mean, inaction in eventuality is a decision, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And so, but they fail to realize that, and you're kind of setting your own. I mean, you're kind of making your own grave at that point if you're truly unhappy with where you're at, right? And they're so set on what could go wrong, but when you start taking small action, a lot of people will start to realize what could go right, and then once you start getting momentum, it's much harder to slow down. Um, because when you make promises to yourself, it's just like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and the harder it is to stop doing it. So the more you make promises to yourself and you keep those promises, you do it over and over and over again. And then when you start to slip up, it hurts. Whereas if you're used to making promises to yourself and then canceling on them and breaking those promises, it becomes very, very easy and you get stuck. Um, and I'll just say I'm very fortunate to have gotten out of that mold very early when I was really one of 2 or 3 people. Like the first massive decision I made was actually forego like the direct use of my undergrad and master's to join the military.
Right.
And in our circles, there was 2 other guys who joined the military, and even which those 2 were not people I would serve with. So I was really, jumping in to an area where I was, really alone. Um, but it really taught me that I can step into these uncomfortable situations and I will make friends, acquaintances, mentors, and use the skills that got me to that point to make sure I'm successful in whatever new scenario I was in. And so that I just kept on, really trusting my gut. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a signal that far too many people ignore or they get afraid of. The momentum piece that you mentioned is really stands out as something that's imperative. Are there examples sticking with the kind of the first transition that you made or big change that you made where you finished 5 years of undergrad graduate school at a good engineering school, and you said, no, I'm basically foregoing this. I'm stepping into the service realm. What were some of those early momentum builders that helped start things moving so that you achieved what you set out for, and accomplish and address some of the fears and excuses that may have cropped up?
I would say so. In the military, step one is OCS. That was tough. That's a lot of manufactured stress. But really, once I got to my first ship, and so it was September of 2015. I was deployed by April. Um, what I quickly learned, um, in that process, 'cause when you show up as a new guy, you're pretty worthless, right? You're kind of you can fog a mirror. That's about it. Um, but your ability to build relationships with the people around you and get vested in their success and they get vested in your success will be really life changing or situational changing for you, right? And so I was always one of those people who I had good grades, but not because I was inherently smarter than people, it was just because I inherently worked very hard. Um, and in the military, you are graded on just about everything. Always from your appearance to your haircut to obviously the job, definitely. Right. And so um getting there and starting to build those relationships and not letting, especially coming in as a new officer. One thing is, for people who aren't familiar, as a junior officer with 0 time in the military, you outrank 90% of the crew,
Boy.
right? And so you
Yeah.
have the authority over them, but how you use that, it's very, you know, you have to be very careful with it because you can gain or lose a lot of respect, right? And so, um, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of good leaders that I worked for that taught me how to use positional authority, as a very like sacred tool, right? And those who abuse it never gain the trust or respect from anybody. And those who know how to use it properly, um, people go to war for, right? Those are those are the leaders you read about. Um, and so learning how to not let, you know, in the end, we're all humans, and rank is just a collar device, right? It doesn't designate your worth. It definitely designates your job and what jobs you can have, but it doesn't designate your knowledge, your integrity, your worth, or anything, right? And so I was fortunate enough to learn that lesson early, and I started to show up. And even though as an officer, you outrank most people, right? I was a junior officer, but an officer compared to enlisted, which most of the crews enlisted, you outrank everybody.
Hmm.
Just try to have the mindset, go into the room and there's something to learn from everybody, right?
Hmm.
And you start building these relationships and you get other people invested in your success. There's in the no matter what the task is at hand, there's, three types of knowledge. There's the things you know, the things you or four three the things you know, the things you don't know, and the things you know, the things you don't know, and the things you don't know, right?
Hmm.
And that third piece of that pie is significantly largest part of that pie, right? And so the
Hmm.
only way to chip away at that is to get other people who know those things to expose you to them. So then eventually they'll turn into the things you don't know, and then eventually you can learn them,
Hmm.
right? But you will never start shifting that pie around until you get other people invested in your success, right? Especially at the rate at which we have to learn, right? And so then you start getting momentum and you start building these relationships, and then I ended up getting fully qualified, 6 months into deployment, which was way earlier than your 18-month allotted timeline. Granted, like living at work and being deployed has a lot to do with that as well. And having a good, running crew. But stepping into that world, the task of getting fully qualified seemed, like insurmountable, or seemed like a lot, right? But then you slowly start to build momentum and you start to figure out who's who in the zoo and who I need to talk to, and your pie of the things now know you don't know. And that's just figuring out how to address those. Um, and you all of a sudden you look back and see all this progress you've made. Um, Another example, really on the professional side. So when decided that doing small real estate, single family, duplex, triplex, wasn't going to get me to my goal, because my whole goal was try to figure out how to replace my income by the time I got out of the Navy.
Yep.
Because once again, like being a nuke, it was a very demanding job. And if you don't live, breathe, sleep nuclear power, is a very tough industry to be in perpetuity. And so I liked it enough and was good at it to do it, you know, very well for the time I did it, but I knew I didn't want to do it for an entire career. And so once I started realizing, like, I think real estate's going to be that vehicle, um, for autonomy, it's like the three things you need for a rewarding life. It's human connections, challenging environment, and autonomy. And the military provided two, but definitely zero autonomy. So my whole goal is, how can I figure out how to build passive income to create the autonomy that was missing in life? I decided to jump into large multifamily, having zero background in it besides just investing in, I had bought a house, a triplex, and a condo to date, right? Um, and so me and my business partner, we talk about, making these promises to yourself and getting the momentum, and then all of a sudden it becomes harder to slow the momentum than it does to
Right.
keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. So we started meeting up, and, we're like, hey, let's set, a weekly meeting, and we'll, create our task list and keep pushing it along. And for the first, so this was, call it November, maybe October 2020, fall 2020. We spent the first like 4 or 5 months doing our weekly meetings. We're figuring out markets, doing market research. We're, interviewing property managers, construction managers, all the things we think we needed to do these big deals. And then all of a sudden, 4 months in, we're like, okay, I think, we have enough to like, start really underwriting deals and going after deals. Right. And so we're
Mhm.
doing our weekly meetings, and all of a sudden we get a lead from a broker. We underwrite it. Oh, this looks like an interesting deal. It's in Des Moines. It's 68 units, listed for, it's a distressed asset. listed for 3.7 million. And we're like, okay, well, I guess the next step is to, start to make offers, and then we can figure out this part of the game and broker interaction, how to negotiate, yada, yada, yada. Well, the first offer we made got accepted, which was like not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And like they called us. It was like there was probably 7, 8 offers on the table.
They took the rookie.
And they took us, and we're just like, and like they called us back, and I'm like talking to Dan about it. We're like, dude, are we gonna accept the accepted offer?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we can't. I mean, I have a government job. Like, I can't afford a $3.7 million apartment complex. And so, but the thing was, it's like, when you have no idea when your next opportunity, like what's the whole reason? Like, what the hell were we just doing for the last 4 months? Was for this moment, right? And the stars aligned, and next thing you know, it's like, okay, so we accepted the accepted offer. We had to raise $1 million to close on this property, having never raised money before, in 90 days. And we raised our millionth dollar on day 88 and closed.
Man, going back to the momentum piece though, had you at that point, had you built enough momentum and maybe even changed or had a shift in like mindset where it's like, this thing might fail, but it's not going to be because we backed out. It will be another reason. Like, was there like a turning point where all of a sudden it didn't become a question of, do we have it in us to keep showing up and keep trying to make this work? It was no questions asked. It's a non-negotiable. We are doing that. And if this thing fails, it'll fail for a totally different reason.
Well, so it's funny. So make sure I'm understanding that question right. I guess I'll answer the question, I guess, with kind of the story. So, I mean, with that deal in particular, like, did I think we were going to fail? I mean, at day one, I mean, kind of. It's not like I thought we were going to fail, but I absolutely had no idea on the path of where this money was coming from.
So
Like,
what allowed
so,
you to step in on day one and go, okay, we're going to figure this out?
it's, I'm a big guy of sayings. And another one I love for this context is, until the pain to change exceeds the pain to stay the same, you will never change.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the whole reason why I jumped into big multifamily, or bigger multifamily, was because that 3-unit I did was like the best and worst investment I ever could have done.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we bought a
That's awesome.
$54,000 all cash triplex. And the reason why we paid $54,000 for it is because that's all we had. And so that's all we could afford. And so when you're looking for triplexes that you can buy for $54,000 all cash, it eliminates most of the country. Right. And so that deal, we made every mistake in the book. And like, honestly, we probably lost just a little, maybe a few grand, or like maybe broke even. But after just 3 years of pain, like getting there. And
Mhm.
like, it was that lesson that was like, like, screw this. Like, the stuff I'm doing in the military is way harder than real estate. I'm thinking too small. I'm thinking scarcity mindset, not abundant mindset. And then, I mean, that was the pain that I needed to, like, screw this. Like, this will not replace my income. Like, my goal is, right? I have to figure out how, like, people do bigger deals, because everybody's
Mhm.
got the same hours in the day. It's just people make bigger decisions. Right. And so on that first deal, you know, we knew we needed to raise money. So, I mean, what would you do? You're going to call people, you're going to email people, you're going to text people, right? We put together a pitch deck that we had modeled after, some, another group, a much larger group, who we kind of got to, mentor us, if you will. I mean, they wouldn't
Mhm.
have considered us mentees, but we absolutely considered them mentors.
Mhm.
Right. And so all of a sudden you start, because we had to put earnest money down. So we had $37,000 that was hard and non-refundable and not coming back. And being, 27 at the time, that's like, with a government job, that was a pretty significant portion of my liquidity.
Mhm.
Right. Um, and so from, I guess, our liquidity. And so from there, we just started calling, texting anybody we'd ever met who we thought, could have an interest. And plus, I mean, we've had some of these conversations ahead. So it's not like we were starting from square
They
zero. We're
weren't all
starting from
cold.
square,
Yeah.
we've had some prelim conversation on people who could be interested, but this was our first deal. So it's our first time like deliberately asking for money for a project, right? And then you start getting enough at bats, and then you start getting enough yeses. You're like, holy crap! Now we're 250,000. Now we're at 500,000. Like, well, we have to close now because like I don't want to go back to these guys and like, I mean, granted, like their money's not at risk, ours was. So if it didn't close, we would just send it back to them. But like now so this is where it gets hard to like slow your momentum. It's like now I'm terrified. One, like I got reputational risk now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't want these guys to sell their stocks, or they moved around money into a self-directed IRA and they sent me 50 grand just for me to give it back to them. Like, oh, sorry, you paid capital gains for nothing. Like, and so you keep going and going and going and going. And eventually we found essentially 20 people who were willing to give us $50,000 for this deal. And it was like, we had 90 days to do it. We closed on June 4th, 2021. And it was like, holy crap, like we just did it. Like we own almost a $4 million property, and I'm still active duty. And then as soon as we did that, like, once again, like operating real estate, it's not that hard. Like it's not easy, but it's like we do way harder stuff like day to day, especially in the military, what we were doing. Like it's what people are afraid of betting on themselves. Right. And like stepping into the unknown. And like, did I have all the answers? No, I had none of the answers. But it's like every step you take, it shines light on like a little bit further. It's like, oh, now that I've done this, okay, I know what. And then all of a sudden you're like, you look back and like, look at all this crap I learned. And then so we got that deal, closed June 2021, started operating it, started giving out cash flow. Like we executed our business plan, started distributing money to our investors. And then 4 months later, we tied up, same thing. We're like, okay, well, let's keep looking at deals. Like we got to figure out how to run and grow the business. Our second offer, we're like, oh, we really like this one, 106 units, 7.5 million, placed an offer, got accepted. We're like, what is going on? It was nuts. And we're like, well, when's the next time
Here
we're
we
getting
go
no
again.
shot at
Yeah.
it? And so it's like, dang. It's like the whole purpose of getting into business was to grow it. And here's our opportunity to grow. We're going to say no. And now we had to raise 2 million. And now we had a committed investor base. They're invested in our, a lot of those people came back. They invested in that. So that 2 million, literally 4 months later, was way easier to raise than the 1 million. And all of a sudden in 6 months, we went from having 0 to, 170 units.
Man.
Multifamily at like 10 million in total value.
Yeah. And I just had this conversation with a group of guys this morning about this broader principle. And simply put, I think one of the travesties of us as humans is we greatly overestimate what we can accomplish in a day, say, and we incredibly underestimate and undervalue ourselves over a longer time period, say like 1 to 3 years. And to hear you say that, like, man, 6 months prior, we were at 0. And, I doubt if you would have gone back and asked yourself that 6 months ago, like, would you believe this reality? Maybe a sliver of you would have been like, oh yeah, that would be the dream. But it truly is. It truly is just about having a vision and then just showing up and continuing to execute. And I think having the humility too of understanding where that knowledge gap is and work to fill it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, they say like the most, it was like, is it a Warren Buffett quote? It says like the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest or something like that. But
yeah,
the same thing goes compounding interest in just like yourself, right? Honestly, like one of the craziest of my accomplishments, one of my most proud, honestly, was September. One of my really close friends, Navy buddy, a special forces guy, he started and is a director for this big charity event called the Swim for Soft, which is a 3.2 mile swim across the San Diego harbor. Every year he's asked me to do the swim, and every year I've told him no because I've been too scared. because I'm not a swimmer, let alone open water swimmer. And this past year, really 2025, I've always been working out, but 2025 was really the first year I did it with a lot of intention to it,
Mhm.
and like cut back on a lot of bad influences, both, vices as well as, people. Started like kind of trimming and really focusing and sharpening my own sword, um, in that realm. Um, and so I was like, you know what? Like, screw it. Like, I really want to do this. This is a great cause. It's supporting a friend, but also like I had a number of friends commit suicide throughout my military career. It's been, part of my learning and growing experience, kind of dealing with those tragic deaths. And it's a charity that helps support, the Honor Foundation, which is a transition program for special forces vets, so to prevent that from happening. Um, but needless to say, I committed to it in end of July, and the race was September 13th. So I had 6 weeks to train for a 3.5 mile swim, and longest I'd ever swam was 500 meters.
And this is open ocean too, right?
I mean, it's ocean, but I guess I shouldn't say open ocean. It's in the harbor, so it's not like I'm not getting the swell.
Is the
But
sea depth greater than 10 feet?
it
Because
is, yeah.
okay, all right.
Yeah. But so, uh, but yeah, so I started watching videos. I started going to the pool. I started just doing open water swims once a week, and um, yeah, and so like all my training for those 6 weeks went geared towards swimming and raising money. And my goal I set out to raise, I was like, well, if I can raise millions for real estate, I can probably raise 10 grand for the swim. I ended up doubling my raise. So I raised over $20,000, which was their individual athlete record, which was awesome. And like the most important thing, but too, like I finished the race in under 2 hours and didn't get
Dang.
last and finished above water. And I was like, holy crap. Like that was, that was amazing, especially on such a short time frame. It's like when you put dedicated compounding interest and effort into a single task, you'll make like exponential growth, compounding interest in yourself, but you have to show up every day to do it. And people are afraid to bet on themselves.
Yeah. And I actually want to tie a lot of what we talked about together off of that swim, because I know in particular you did the swim, as you said, in honor of some folks. And if it would be all right, I'd like to read something that you wrote, and then um have you kind of expand on it. So quote, "He saw more in me than I saw in myself and pushed me until I became that person. Tragically, like too many others, he passed away not long after his separation from active duty, following a battle with the invisible injuries so many veterans face after taking off the uniform." Who did you write that about, and how did they show up for you in your life?
So that was Commander Manny Hernandez. He was my first captain I ever had in the military. He was you know, so he was captain of Spruance while I was on Spruance. He joined the Navy, 17, immigrant from Mexico, I believe through like the military green card program, and worked his way up from like a deck seaman, which is the lowest rank in the military, all the way through the enlisted ranks, transitioned over to the officer program side, and then all the way up to commander and took command of a ship. Um, and he was like the first father figure I had, really, I would say, because he was he was not my friend. Um, just like the way like your father and my father, like they're not supposed to be friends. They're supposed to be our
Right.
fathers,
Yes.
right? And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he held me like wildly accountable to everything, every single detail, everything that I put my name on had to be like absolutely perfection, both in terms of like the physical presentation or whatever, if it's a document or a message, or if it's an evolution, how I led my sailors, or like steering the ship, everything. If something was off, I found out immediately and violently. Right. And it wasn't out of arrogance. It was out of the fact he gave a shit about me. And if I wasn't going to hold myself to that standard, which I wasn't, because I didn't think I had it in me, I was comfortable, as everybody tends to be comfortable with whatever status quo is. He forced me to grow. Right. And um, it was not the leader or the person I asked for, but it was the leader and person I needed at that stage in time, coming out of active duty and leaving home or coming into active duty, leaving home, knowing nobody, and just, you're kind of an arrogant college kid on top of the world, think you're hot shit, yada, yada, yada. And I quickly found out I was not. Not only was I not, I was wildly underperforming in most areas of my life, and especially in the professional world. And he wasn't going to have it. And it's funny, like, he was one of those leaders where either you would go to war for him or you hated his guts, but it was all based on whether or not you're willing to meet the challenge, right? And so, granted, a lot of the way he presented it was like pretty abrasive. So some people tend to cower with that type of leadership. But for me and my personality, like, I was never one to back down from, that type of fight or challenge. And I didn't really know it because I'd never been presented with it. But once it hit me in the face, I pushed through some pretty significant barriers at a very young age and gained a ton of confidence that I never had growing up. I was always very much a people pleaser, go along to get along mentality. I never had enemies because I never stood up for anything. And I made a lot of friends that way, but I was never, ever going to get what I wanted because I put other people's priorities above my own.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one who literally by force, like, ripped it out of me and forced me to hold myself to that standard. And I feel so fortunate to have had that type of leader, because had I worked with him, say at not 22, at 27, maybe 32, later on when I was more set in my ways, I probably wouldn't have been as open to that leadership style, which is probably why, he was kind of one of those divisive leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like everything I needed to get out of who I was
Mm-hmm.
for the better.
Do you feel like
And
he approached and treated everyone the same, and it was just a matter of how you responded to that?
100%.
Okay.
100%. That's why I like, even for people who didn't like him, everybody really respected him because
Mm-hmm.
he treated everybody the same way. He held everybody to that standard. I definitely was not unique, but the situation was unique for me. But everybody knew if you were going to come to the captain or you had anything for him, like, it was going to be squared away, or like you were going to find out like on the spot immediately, and it was going to be loud.
Do you have any particular favorite memory or experience of maybe falling under expectations
The
or
first one that,
rising up?
if I spend some more time thinking about it, I could probably come up with a few more, but I would say the funniest one, but it just kind of showed his character as well and just how much he cared. So we're on deployment, and especially like if you serve on ships and you deploy, you'll do these things called tiger cruises, which is like an unbelievable experience. And so what a tiger cruise is then your last stop before you come home. They'll fly all the families out to that location. So for us, it was Hawaii. A third of the crew gets off the ship, the family comes on board, and then they come with us from Hawaii to San Diego, right?
Wow.
And so I really wish I had, um, like, shame on me for not doing this, but the story is, so my mom had become friends with the captain's wife, just through like the Facebook moms group and whatnot. And I didn't want my parents to come on the Tiger Cruise because I was just so, consumed with deployment, and I just wanted to see everybody at home. And I don't know. I know honestly, I didn't know how they were going to do in the conditions. Like it's not a cruise. Like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you're
It
coming on
might
a
sound like
warship,
it. Yeah.
right? And it's like hyper non-handicap accessible, right?
Right.
Oh, and so needless to say, I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want them to want to come for me to like explain it like, hey, I actually don't think this is like a good idea. Um, but needless to say, he found out that I didn't tell my parents because of his wife. Because I guess his wife had talked to my mom's like, oh, are you coming on the Tiger Cruise? And she's like, what's the Tiger
What
Cruise?
cruise?
And so word got back to him and he comes up to me and I'm standing watch as off to the deck, which is essentially like the pilot of the ship, right? And he's like, Hampel, what are you got plans for the Tiger Cruise? I was like, oh no, sir. I'm just, just kind of hanging out. I'm just gonna catch my parents or family at the pier. And he's like, well, how come? I was like, oh, and I'm like kind of spinning. And like he asked the question in a way where I knew he knew the answer. And I was like, oh dang. And so I kind of stopped. Like I was like, I didn't want to lie. And I stopped and I like kind of turned at him. And he's like, did you never tell your parents? I was like, no, I didn't. He's like, all right, you're going to get yourself a relief right now. And you're going to go to the sailor phone and call your mom right now.
Oh my gosh.
And so like, he said it in a way that's like, it's very like, it's cunning. And so I was like, oh,
Yeah.
and so, in the end, like, so I'm calling my buddies asking for somebody to come upstairs to relieve me. They come up, relieve me. I go downstairs, call my mom, like tell them about it. And like the timing didn't work out anyways, but had I given her notice, she definitely would have wanted to come. Um, but that was always one that just like really stood out to me because like he just like when I say like every aspect, it was like everything like how like and the most important things to him were how you treated other people because him joining the Navy at 17 as an immigrant who barely knew English. Yes, he had to work very hard, but he needed a lot of people to vest in his interest to make rank eventually to the point where you're high enough rank where you can even submit an officer package. And then that officer package has to get validated and vouched for. And then that has to get approved. And then you have to go up the ranks on the officer side. And then you have to all the things. So it's like the military is such a very good example. You know, you have to have people in your corner to be successful. Right. And so, like on every side of your personality, like he was all over you, making sure you one took care of other people to enable their success, but also that other people were taking care of you, and he was going to hold you to that standard.
Mhm. Do you when was the last time that you saw him?
Um, it would have been, unfortunately, it was a few. So I talked to him more than I saw him. Um, it's funny. He actually invested in one of our deals.
Really?
Um, yeah, the last time, last time I saw him was at, he had a birthday barbecue and he invited a bunch of, our old shipmates over. It was cool seeing like, as the CO, he had all ranks there, right? From like super, super young guys who served underneath him to all, a lot of the old parts who had been around like just as long as him. Like he, whether people liked him or not, people like, he demanded and got respect because he deserved it. And yeah, it was really sad 'cause he definitely had his demons. And it was essentially alcoholism that ended up getting him. Uh which is just, really sad and um because of how much good he put out, he oftentimes didn't take heed his own advice, right? And it slowly, that was the unraveling of his marriage and the unraveling of his relationship with his kids. Um, it's actually, I have a relationship with one of his sons still. I actually saw him the other week. Um, but yeah, I mean, even after the Navy, he was always like, it's funny, like he literally, he was always investing in me, both this time and then eventually like financially, as he was betting on, even though like once again, like us being young operators and it knew it in the multi, and I literally had a full-time job as active duty. So it was like 1,000 reasons not to invest.
Yeah.
And he still like constantly just bet on the jockey, and his belief in me allowed me and helped me believe in myself to continue to push through what I thought I was really capable of. Yeah. And it's, yeah, it sucks that he's not here.
Yeah. Did did you ever feel like he got close to opening up about struggles, or did you guys ever have conversation around that, or was it I mean, I think as a whole, like, we just don't really know how to broach those conversations.
Um, yes and no. It's, and this was like a huge learning thing for me and part of my struggles. Like I had, as I mentioned, like there were 6 people that I knew have either committed suicide or had, self-destructing acts that essentially led
Mhm.
to uh their passing from 2021 to 2024, which was like really, really difficult. His being obviously one of the more difficult ones. Um, but like when it happened, I mean, the first thing I thought of was like, I knew he was not doing well. And did he ever share it with me? Kind of. He started like, I think my last conversation with him actually was about how he hasn't seen his kids in like 3 months. And it wasn't by choice or by design or by court order. Um, but he was separated from the family. His divorce was finalized, and his boys were just opting to not see him, right? And I talked through him. I mean, we talked about it obviously, but if I had, knowing what I know now, would have been way more intentional about seeking the help that he wasn't getting himself the way he did it for me, right? And he made it uncomfortable for me. Like I didn't want the help. I didn't think I needed the help. I thought I was good. I was alpha. I was all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's like you are coming with me, and he grabbed me by the freaking collar and pulled me toward new heights. Right. And that phone call was my opportunity, and I missed it. And it sucks because like you sit there and you're listening and you say sorry 1,000 times, but like sorry doesn't mean shit, right? It's
Right.
like, of course you're sorry, but it's like, what are you
Yeah.
going to do about it? And that was his silent way of reaching for help. And I confirmed that it was a bad situation by saying sorry, which is what's tough to think about because that was my window to say, hey, what are you doing about it? You have the resources you need. Like you're not in California, you're out in San Antonio. Is that really the best place for you when your entire military support system's here in San Diego? Like I'm signing you up. I'm putting you in touch with this group, this, X, Y, and Z, or I mean, probably wouldn't have even been somebody in my network, but I have people in my network who probably have a network that could have directly impacted him, right? And definitely learned, a lot from that as well as the others about when you see those things come up, saying sorry is like one of the worst things to say.
Mhm.
Not because it's mean or it's not true, because like of course you're sorry for the circumstances, but that's not what they need. They don't need to
Yeah.
be sorry. They need you to do something
Yeah.
because they're not getting it themselves.
Yeah. I when people are encountering hardships now, I'm pretty deliberate about trying to say at the very least. I mean, figuring out what to say is nearly impossible. You're not gonna be perfect, and so I think I've kind of let go of that pursuit of the perfect words. Um, but if I do say something, I wind up saying, just recognizing this is hard. What a challenge. And to try to avoid saying I'm sorry because on and I'm very forgiving of the people that um like I seriously have not even in the moment was I burned or upset by it, but being on the receiving end of an I'm sorry when you are going through such difficulties um really sound it is somebody saying I don't know what to say. And I would rather hear somebody say, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm willing to be here. I'm willing to listen. Um, if you want advice, I'm willing to give advice. And that's what I found, especially going through the um time after losing Lucy. It's like, man, it would oscillate by the hour what I felt like I needed. So if someone would have come and said, I'm here for you. What do you need? There were moments where I'm like, I just want you to listen. I want to talk about her. There were other moments where it was like, I want to be distracted. Like I want to
Yeah.
be intentionally distracted. Like, let's go do something. And there
Right
were
now.
other moments where it's like, I want to be with somebody. And I think offering up, acknowledging how hard the situation is, being honest about like, I don't know what to say. It's just, it's impossible. It's impossible to say the right thing. Honestly, it's impossible to do the right thing, but I do feel like that the I'm sorry is just a reflection and kind of a bit of a symptom of like, I do feel like we have sort of lost the ability to work through some aspects of hardship that is a part of the human experience. Again, it's just like, we live in an unbelievable world. We live in with incredible amounts of safety and things that preserve life. And you don't have the life conditions that we did even 50 or 100 years ago, and that changes our experience with hardship, grief, and loss. And on top of it all, I think the component of community, and I know you've mentioned it a couple times. I think there was like a pushback against really the need for community, but I've really found nothing more imperative to have than those relationships, those bonds, those moments that you can touch and hold and hug somebody. And at the very least have these types of conversations. Um, so I think, it's a pretty typical situation to find yourself in. I'm curious, do you feel like you have had to work on forgiving yourself, or do you feel like you have forgiven yourself when you reflect back on those moments?
Yeah, I would say so. I've definitely had to work at it. I've been going to therapy for quite a while now. I started after actually one of my other shipmates from that ship uh passed, and I was supposed to see him actually the day before it happened, and I canceled. And so that was very tough. Um and so it was one of the things I worked through a lot with therapy. And it was funny because, like, I guess funny is the wrong word, but like ironic how for the longest time, like, I'm in my early 20s, and honestly, for a very long time, I didn't believe like mental health or anxiety or depression were like real things. I
Mm-hmm.
just thought it's like either, oh, this is just the label we're going to call people who don't want to put in the work to figure this thing out themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's not, chemical imbalances and some things are out of your control and like an actual physical state until these started to happen to me. Right. And so it's like deployments were tough, but like they were easy. It's like quality of life was low and you missed home and you missed like creature comforts, but like
Mhm.
I was never like, it's not hard. It's just you're longing for normalcy and getting back to normal, getting back home. But once all those started happening, was the first time I felt truly out of control of things. Like I'd be driving down the road and it's like you think you feel fine and like I'm okay, but all of a sudden I have these like intrusive thoughts come through. It's like, oh, it'd be so easy to just
Mhm.
like, you're in a 2-lane highway, you just go a quick shoot over and just,
Mhm.
and then those thoughts like continued and you're like, what the, like, what is going on? Like, why am I having these thoughts? And like, I can't focus, I can't sleep. And then it all compounds and like that spiral starts and it becomes very, it doesn't justify it ever, but it became very clear how things can slip out of control for people. And I was very fortunate enough to really get forced into therapy, despite me saying at the time, like, anxiety is not real, depression is not real. It's just, but then once I started like going through and like addressing my issues and like coming to terms like, oh, wait, this isn't normal. What I think is normal, what my baseline is actually wildly out of whack and off normal. Um, and it wasn't until those things started happening that I started to really peel back the layers of the onion and, really learn from those scenarios and, for no, it's like forgive myself, but it's like I didn't, it's what, it's like accept the things you cannot change and figuring out what those were, right? And like I would, God, I would pay. There's no amount of money I wouldn't pay to take that like Friday night back and not cancel dinner with
Mhm.
him,
Mhm.
right? But the thing was, it's like at the time, like him and I had been going back and forth for like a couple weeks and like scheduling, rescheduling. And like I just had like a really tough week from like other stuff and work and yada, yada, yada. And like I was, I thought I had more time, right? Had I obviously known what was going to transpire the next day, I would have cleared obviously my entire schedule in the next freaking week to make sure I was with him, right? And it's so yeah, I mean, I have learned to forgive myself, but also it's coming to terms with making decisions with knowledge you had at the time
Right.
and you don't know what people are going through. And what it's really allowed me to learn is to see the signs earlier and just deliberately check on people,
Yeah.
right? Because that's something I've become more intentional about is like, hey, like, you have all these group chats and you're keeping up with all your buddies, but like in reality, you're not keeping up with any of them because you're just sending freaking memes back and forth. You don't
Yep.
know how we're actually doing. I talk to them
Yep.
every day. Do I really know how some of these guys are doing? Definitely
Right.
not. So
Right.
it's like my inner circle and people like I truly, truly care about. Like I want to make sure like step aside. There's no signs, or maybe there are some signs, but just
Mhm.
like, hey, how are you? No, 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 actually, how are you?
Yeah.
And then, maybe everything's fine. Wife's good. Kids are good. Happy, healthy. We're great. Okay, great. Love it. I'm glad we were able to actually catch up. But one of these conversations could be like, dude, I'm not doing good. And then who knows, maybe I don't know, save a life or at least allow somebody to be allow yourself to be the ear that person need to not do something irreversible or yeah, I don't know, but I mean, that's the biggest thing was just learning to ask the question to check on your friends regardless of if there's signs or not. And yeah, it's
I mean,
important.
I'm thinking back to how you were talking about with your grandpa Wolf, carrying a legacy and honoring him forward, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like you do honor people's lives by taking the hardships that have come up and seeing it out in the world. And what I mean by that, and I love hearing you say that, because I'm I'm pretty upfront with people. Like, don't ask me how I'm doing unless you seriously want. Like, you see the regret on people's faces sometimes when they ask me, and I'm like, you asked. And I'm a little tempered about it, based on the situation. But man, I had a profound experience actually a couple weeks back at church. And the short version is we walked in late, and so kind of had to shuffle some people around to find a seat. And just based on the body language of the person next to me before my butt was even in the chair, I knew I had to talk to this person. I had to figure out how to um, tell this person that if they needed to talk, that I would be willing to listen. And it was just off of the only way I can describe it is I saw a ghost of myself. And I just kind of kept an eye on that person throughout the service. And like, just it was just confirmed. And finally I found a moment, and I'd written my name and number on a piece of paper. I handed it to them at a time when things were kind of moving around, and I just told them, if you have something on your heart you want to talk about, I'm here for you. And I wasn't expecting anything in response, but this person looked at me and just had the biggest eyes, and was like, yes, I want to have that conversation. And so we stuck around afterwards, probably 20 or 25 minutes, and they just opened up about hardship that they were going through. And it wasn't that they were struggling with alcoholism. Like, that wasn't the ghost of my past that I had necessarily seen, but it was this inner turmoil. And they opened up that the previous night, like, they had dealt with suicidal ideation in the past, but it hadn't come up. And the previous night, that they had such a compelling desire to end things that it scared him into church. And then we crossed paths. And it's those moments that I would have been fearful of in the past, and I would have walked away, or I just would have been like, well, that was weird. It's not my place to interject, or it's not my problem. um and that's changed. There's been a change within me. You can't solve everyone's issues, and you can't force somebody into a conversation or into healing. Like, I will never call anybody an alcoholic. I can only assess
Yeah.
me and my situation, but I can share my experience, and I can listen to people. Um so those I don't know. I think that's a huge push for doing this work, is I want to maybe set an example for how to have some of these conversations, and to show people, like, you're going to be challenged in ways that you never expected. Look at your life and all of the things that you've gone through, and you've changed, and you've succeeded at, and you've made it through hardships. But it seems like some of the most challenging times were the most unexpected ones. And there's a level of preparation to it, right? But you also have to be ready, ready to live in it.
Yeah. It's tough, and you don't know what those conversations are going to bring. And so you just, the biggest mindset shift is just being aware that as much as we have respectively needed those to happen, unfortunately, we got the help that we needed in time, that we can potentially be those for those other people. And more often than not, those conversations will put those feelers out there, and they won't need it, and hopefully they won't, right? But even if you just get one of those right, the butterfly effect from that type of conversation is
Yeah.
literally life changing.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes you won't even know the
The impact.
breadth of your impact. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And kind of to draw us to a close here, Morgan. Um Obviously it, again, just the way I open, like you're just one of the people I look to and look to exemplify. And I'm just genuinely curious. Like you have every time I get a call from you or we exchange messages and it's like, hey, this is on my mind. Like this is kind of on my heart. This is going to be my next pursuit. It is truly like, just give them a certain amount of time. Morgan's going to get there. Um, what is the vision for you? Now that you have done so much, but like what is next for Morgan?
I mean, honestly, I mean, so we're managing and maintaining our portfolio right now, multifamily. Um, working with this new group now. We're trying to grow. So Comfort Capital is the name of the group. We're trying to grow this to a $1 billion uh, enterprise, about a little under halfway there. Um, and it's really cool getting back with it's kind of like an entrepreneur. Like I'm working with them for them, but helping really build this thing has been really exciting. So on the business side, that. But honestly, a lot of my, you know, it's also, personal, right? It's, people talk about work-life balance. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Because if work sucks, it bleeds into life. If your life
Yep.
sucks, it absolutely bleeds into work, right? So
Yep.
it's like, I don't even know why that's even a thing, or why people talk about it as if there's a separation. There's no separation, and everybody's goal should be figure out how to marry and create the perfect yin and yang for those so they don't affect each other, or at least minimize the impact, right? Um, and so, personally, like really leaning into the progress I made last year physically. Um, like when I, talked about like the spiral I was on, I was drinking a ton, partying a lot to mask where my head was really at, which led to horrible, very high anxiety, very low sleep, which created more stress and strained my relationships, which caused me to drink and party more, which caused me to sleep worse, which caused me, that spiral. I got blood work for the first time and my like, I mean, for the world to hear, like, I mean, my testosterone levels were that of like a 70-year-old man, right? That was the first time objectively seeing how poor I was doing. Right, because it's very easy to talk about, like, the subjective feelings. Those are concrete numbers that are in data from
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
blood
Yeah.
sample of how I was doing, right? And so as I've started to work out with intention and take care of, like, sleep is, like, sacred and making sure, like, my sleep is, like, prioritized, not just, like, getting enough, but getting enough quality sleep. It's not just enough. It's not you gotta have high quality sleep and then like, pretty much cutting out alcohol and like cutting out just not, I don't call them, they're not bad people, but just bad influences.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really surround myself with bad people, but there's definitely people that I should be spending more time with than others. Right. And so being very sacred with my time and who do I give my time to? Right. And, and also like literally taking the vitamins I need for where I'm deficient in and making sure like I can, because like once you can get your testosterone levels back up, that impacts energy, which impacts mood, which impacts production, which impacts relationships, which impacts sleep, like in the same way things can spiral down, they can
Mhm.
also spiral up.
Yep.
Right. And so my pivot really ended 24, 25 following, 3 very, very hard years. Um, have kind of allowed me to, really, I feel like I'm in the beginning of an upward spiral finally, right? I'm sleeping better than I ever have. I'm completing, like fitness challenges. I thought I wouldn't be able to do in my 20s, let alone like I'm approaching my mid 30s. I'm knocking some of these things out. Like and business is going well, and I'm growing. I'm working with an outstanding team in a really cool asset class, and I'm excited to wake up and do these things. Um, it's the first time I've been truly able to say that, and honestly, maybe ever.
Hmm.
If I wasn't like thrilled about high school, like
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
college was
Right.
college.
Yep.
There's a lot of stress with school and all that stuff. So I mean, it's like I'm very excited for like what's coming down. And like, granted, like I got my fair share of issues and things I got to work out because those 3 years I committed to a bunch of things and made a bunch of decisions that I'm paying for now, and I have to figure out how to navigate it. But like I'm navigating it. And it's with help of people I know, like, and trust. And yeah, I just know that the next chapter, is going to be, really, really great. Good relationship. And I mean, goal is to, get married, have kids, and be able to provide and protect my family. Like that's the
Mhm.
goal.
Well, been incredible getting to reconnect here. It's been a while since I've seen your beautiful face. So this was time well spent, and I appreciate it more than I can really express. And um, more than anything, I'm excited and just thrilled for you. It
I
is
appreciate
something
it.
that I can say honestly. In the past, it's like you're plagued by comparison, by like ripping yourself down by seeing others perceive success. But I love what you've built. I love how you built it. I love your honesty, and your humility and your friendship. So thank you. You know that I'm here for you, and I will call upon
Likewise.
you if I ever need anything. So thank you very much, man. And from the bottom of my heart, I love you.
Love you too, man. Appreciate you, Z. Thanks
Yep.
for having me on.